Hello Modkit Mayhemers, welcome back. Here's a new video. And it's a hand painting video of a 1/48 Hellcat. Like all sad kits, this one was bought back when my son was born and I thought I'd have some spare time. So it was built and then I never did anything with it. It just stayed in a drawer. At some point I undercoated it. It got sprayed in a satin black. My son is now 6, going nearly 7, and I thought I'd finish it. I thought it'd make an interesting video because I tried an effect on this. I tried painting some paint over the top of the satin and I noticed it kind of waxed. A very mottly effect, you know, some paint would stick, some wouldn't, and I thought it was kind of interesting, kind of pre-shading. And this is a kind of version of that, but accidental, worth exploring. I don't know, we'll see how it goes. So basically what you need to do is get your aircraft, I think spraying it satin will cause the wax effect. And then use different whites, paint individual panels with quite watered down acrylic paint. You'll see it doing the kind of thing, and sometimes it needs a couple of coats. One first coat might look absolutely hideous and there'll be a lot of black marks where it's not fixed, but then you do it on second time, it will kind of bind on. But yeah, it's up to you how far you go with that. And then once you've done the whole aircraft in this kind of way, you can apply whatever top paint you want. You know, it could be one colour like the original blue that would go on the Hellcat. Or in this case, I fancied doing a navy camouflage scheme from the sort of Pacific Fleet, kind of, or Indian Ocean. You know, the Air Force out there had Hellcats, but they were in a kind of camo scheme and it looked quite cool, so adds a little bit to it, so I thought I'd try that. So I did a bit of research, found a couple of schemes, and then decided that I'd have to make up my own version because I didn't have the right transfers for that particular aircraft, so I just took some other transfers which I had. But first of all, you get the RAF colours. I used a green, and I think this might have been an olive green actually, and then a grey, the standard RAF grey, and then yeah, paint on the green, but again make sure it's very, very thin down, and then you can do multiple coats so that you still allow for the undercoat or the waxing effect to show through. Up to you how much you want it to show through in terms of how much you water down the paint. You know, the less paint you put on there, the more worn it looks, and then the thicker the paint, the kind of dulls down the effect, so it doesn't look so textured. And it's just one of those ones you have to experiment a little bit. You know, each way you do it's going to be different, so just try and see what happens. So once the green was done, I went on to the grey, and that was a little bit thicker than the green, so I had to be a bit more careful with that, a bit more water down, so it took a few goes to get that kind of the feel of the paint. But you know, eventually I got there and it painted on fine. I find using flat-headed brushes the best way to do this. You can kind of get the most coverage and definitely a flatter coat. Still get a brush that's small enough that you can do individual panels, so like I'm doing here. If you painted it all in one, it loses the effect. Texturing just kind of dulls out. Do individual panels, just if you can, it keeps the underlying effect. At least that's what I found. Once you've kind of done the overall main camouflage, you can just go on and paint the individual elements like the hub on the prop. Here I went onto the underneath. I painted it with the S-type RAF. It's kind of greeny grey colour. Quite a nice colour once you get it on. Being very careful, very, very watered down to kind of preserve the underlying effect. It's very much a patience kind of game on this one, so yeah, just build up in layers. Once you've kind of got a kind of coat that you're happy with, you can use a larger flat-headed brush and just do a kind of overall coat, which will preserve the texture enough that it's sort of still there, but you get a bit more of an even coat, which I think works better on the bottom of the Hellcat. There we have it, the underneath is done. You can just see there the effect, you know, just showing through under the S-type green. That's what you're kind of trying to achieve, you know, that you still get the colour of the aircraft, but you sort of keep the effect, the worn look. Onto the masking. It's not too bad, the Hellcat, considering it's only got a few panels. I think I made a mistake here with a primer that I used. I used a grey spray can to just prime the bars. The fact that it was an old can, and I think it wasn't mixed properly, or it'd been left there for too long, maybe heated up, cooled down too much, and when I sprayed it, it bled really bad underneath. My own fault really. I should have peeled off the masking pretty much as soon as I thought it was dry enough and then scraped off with a cocktail stick, but I left it for a few days, maybe even a week. And then when I peeled them off, the primer had dried so much that there was no way of scraping it back off without damaging the actual clear part of the plastic. I found Johnson's Clear made it look a little bit better. It's a lesson learned. Don't leave primed masking too long. Just check it pretty much as soon as you can, and then you can scrape off any bits if it's gone underneath the masking. Once I was happy with all the kind of main block camouflage, I painted the whole aircraft in a Johnson's Clear, again using a flat brush to give you as smooth coverage as possible. To be honest, it settles quite well, so you don't have to worry about it too much. Just make sure you try not to leave any patches where you've not covered it. This will allow the transfers to go on much better, and there's quite a few very, very small ones on this aircraft, so I want to make sure I've got a good base coat of the clear. Here's the original Hobby Boss transfers. They were for the American aircraft. I wanted the British one, so I scoured the box of rogue transfers and found some for the 172 Hellcat, and then the other one was off the B-25 Mitchell, so I just mixed and matched. I mean, it's not a real aircraft and such, it's just made up, but at the end of the day, this is kind of like a kit that was going to go in the bin. So if you can learn from an old kit, great, go ahead. This is what I do. Once the transfers are down, I put Vallejo transfer settler, so it kind of just blends it into the panel lines. You have to do it a couple of times, and it also gets rid of, if there's any little silvering, it kind of seems to get rid of most of that, so that's quite good. It's worth getting it for that. Considering the transfers were really, really old for the big ones, the roundels, they went on, pretty well. Going back to what I said about the canopy, you can see me peeling off the masking here, and this shows how long it was, and you can see there where it's just gone down the edges of the masking, which is a shame. I scraped off as much as I could. And then disaster struck. I knocked over my water over the very small transfers, and I have to have a disaster in every build. Luckily they still worked fine, so I just had to cut them out and carry on. Now the little transfers are incredibly fiddly. For me anyway. It was a bit of a test of patience, but you got to keep going. It's part of it. It did look better for them. It was worth putting them on. Once I'd done them, I painted the exhaust stains. Noticed on Hellcats quite a white where the paint's burnt, I think, and so I put down a kind of rough mottling of that, just dabbed it on with a really rough brush, and I gave it texture. Gun stains, blob of black, and then just smudge it out with your finger. You could do it with a cotton bud, probably a bit better. I was obviously rushing here, so just wanted to get the kit finished and done. And that's probably when you make the most mistakes. Don't throw away knackered old brushes. You can keep them and use them for effects. And the transfers onto the propeller, the kind of the mate logo, it looks really harsh when you've done it, so it's a good idea to, once you've put them on, just dab it some black on top of that, or very dark grey, and it just makes it look, it blends it in better. Put a overall wash on over the camo, and I was hoping that it would just bleed into the panel lines and then I could dry it off with a bit of tissue and the panels would be left, but it didn't actually work like that. Whenever I did, it always wiped off more of the wash than I actually wanted it to. I even left the wash longer, I thought maybe it needs to dry more, but that didn't do it either. I don't know whether it's the undercoat been painted on so many times, it didn't do it. So you can see here, I tried a different effect. I just got a fanned brush and brushed it down so it looks almost like rain streaks over the top, and that gave it a kind of interesting start effect. That was a better way of doing it, I think. Like I said, the panel lines didn't seem to work for me, so just individually got a small brush and painstakingly painted in pretty much every panel line. If you go over, just fade it off as best you can. The actual effect looks good and it's well worth doing. That was the best way forward. I used a Vallejo dark grey wash, and then underneath I think I used a brown. And here underneath, painting the individual hatch panels. and then I gave it a very, very watered down thinner wash over the top individual panels, just to give it a little bit more extra kind of grimy look. Again, using a flat brush. I also noticed that on the photos where the pilots climbed in and out, or aircraft carrier crew would leave oily fingerprints up the side of the aircraft. That's quite a nice effect. So yeah, again, rubbish old brush and just mottled on some very dark grey to where the fingerprints were. Another coat of matte varnish, glued on the canopy using PVA glue, and then a little bit of super glue just to hold it in place. Prop into place, that looks good. And there we have it, one Hellcat. Considering that this kit was bound for the bin, the results are there, and I think it looks pretty good. I'm really happy with that. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm going to work on some new ones as soon as I can, and yeah, see what happens. I hope you have a happy new year. Like and subscribe below, and thanks very much for watching. Cheers, ta-ra, bye.